Welcome back to Real Talk with Susan Stone and Kristina Supler. We are full-time moms and attorneys bringing our student defense legal practice to life with real, candid conversation. Last week was Accepted Students Weekend for Tori. Can you believe it?
Oh, what a big, how do you feel now that you know where she's going? And
oh my gosh. First of all, for the listeners out there, my youngest just accepted college. She will be going to Ringling College in Sarasota, Florida, which is an art school.
fabulous.
But to have it done for the final time was crazy. And our guest today, I also know has 3 kids, but I think all of them are out of college. Welcome back, Davida Amkraut.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually have one still in college. He's just finishing his sophomore year. So,
Well, we're glad you're able to join us again. Our listeners
Yeah.
probably remember you from some of your prior recordings with us, and welcome back.
it's good to see you guys. Yeah.
Where is your youngest? Northeastern?
So that's my middle. He's graduating in May from Northeastern. He's graduating in 2 weeks, and my youngest is at George Washington University.
And how was his experience there?
Loves it. He's in the pre-physical therapy program there. So he's having
Wow.
that's back to your basics, simpler.
Yeah.
Physical therapy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
For everyone out here. Christina's
Families in the PT biz.
they're all in the PT biz. So, Davida, you've had a lot of career changes lately. Why don't you catch our listeners up with what you're doing?
Yeah, so I still am running my own private practice where I assist. This past year, I had about 55 kids from all across the country, actually, who I worked with on college admissions. But I also joined a high school team in the Bronx where I'm working at a Jewish high school in the Bronx, and I am on their college counseling team. So it's really fascinating for me to see both sides of the table, right? So I'm working with kids from my computer, but then I'm also working with kids in person. And I've had a lot of access to admission officers, which has been amazing. I've been on advocacy calls for my students. For the listeners who don't know what that means is prior to decisions being released, if schools allow it, we have a call with the admission officer for our rep for our region. And we're sort of able to pitch our case, and, tell them a
So
little
you can
bit.
literally lobby for a particular student to have a spot at a certain
Only at certain schools. A lot of schools have done away with these advocacy calls because it prevents an inequity, because not every counselor has the time to make 400 phone calls for their students. But because we're at a smaller school, our caseload is a little bit smaller. So we do have the ears and eyes of some counselors who are still very happy to talk to us. So, for example, Cooper Union, which is an engineering and architecture school in Manhattan. I don't know if you're
I
familiar.
looked at Cooper Union with Tori.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I actually was able to talk to Cooper about my student who they were considering for a regular decision and give them an update about everything that he's been doing since he last applied in person. And then they were able to ask me questions. And it was like a 15-minute phone call. But it's a fascinating thing, right? To be able to have that access. Some schools will just call and give you the numbers of who is going to get in and who's not going to get in by names, actually. But you can't really advocate at that point because it's already done.
Done deal.
A done deal, but they do give the courtesy to the admission, the college counselors to let them know what the decisions are going to be so that we can be there for the students on the receiving end.
Could you have done that for your private clients?
No. They will never speak to independent office counselors at all. No.
So what can the independent college counselor do that's different from the in-house school college counselor?
So I always say the in-house school college counselor is not only, well, it depends on if it's a college counselor or if it's a high school counselor. So you'll see that verbiage has changed because if it's a high school counselor, that counselor, and I know in Beechwood, in Shaker, they are high school counselors as well as college counselors. So not only are they dealing with the college process, they're also dealing with the social emotional piece for every single student in that high school. So they have a very, very big caseload. If they're dealing with social emotional and college sort of doesn't always take the front seat to that. So an independent counselor can help identify schools. They can help keep the kids on deadlines. They can do read-throughs of essays. They could help position them a little bit better and look at their activities and say, you're applying to an engineering program. You have nothing engineering on your application. We need to get you involved with something. A counselor at a large public school probably doesn't have the bandwidth to do that, right? They're just looking at it, doing a cursory review. They're going on scattergrams, which is the Naviance or score to see where they have sent other kids in their school and making a guess about where the kid should apply without really having that in-depth consultation, if that makes sense.
When you have a kid, let's say you have 5 kids at your high school, all looking at George Washington. Can you advocate for all 5, or do you have to
We probably wouldn't advocate for all 5. We would choose the one that we think would probably be the most successful, or the one that they would really want, looking at the profile and and also knowing that that might not be that student's first choice, right? We have that intel. So we would never advocate for a school if it's an early action or if it's a regular decision for a school that we know that the kid would never go to. Does that make sense? We know what
the right kid. But let's say you have 3 kids. I'm going to say a popular school this year. They want Michigan and they're dying to get into Michigan. Do you pick the best horse?
Well, Michigan doesn't let advocacy calls. Are you surprised by that? They they have
because they don't need to. I mean, they get the best of the best.
They had 75,000 applications this year for a class of 7,000. That was their numbers for this year. And that was 70,000 early action, right? So who knows how many additional kids applied in their regular season, right? So a lot of kids will not apply during that early action because they want to use that time to get their grades up, for instance, right? So then they'll hold back their application until the January 1st to really show their, the upward trajectory. So that's only 70,000 early action applications for a class of 7,000, right?
So what are your takeaways from this past, season? I mean, what did you see? What trends and what lessons, were learned for students who are, on the brink for next year?
Yeah, well, I would say actually, funny you should ask that, but just yesterday we had 2 bombshells just dropped on our laps on April 11th that 2 of the big schools are now going to require testing. Harvard and Caltech announced April 11th that now they're going to require testing, which is very, very, it's so hurtful to so many counselors who are.
But other schools announced that too, in the Ivy.
They did it before the March SAT.
Earlier, so that's the issue. Was the timing of
the timing is terrible because
why that's a bomb, Davida. Are they punishing the kids who didn't submit their?
No, I don't think that they're punishing. I mean, Harvard, 86% of their kids submitted test scores. So they were never fully test optional, right? That's for sure. But it is for kids who are, who have planned their testing, who have talked to counselors, who have sort of said, okay, I want to focus on X, Y, and Z because I'm just not a great tester. That really puts them now in a bind to have to test. And the next SAT, I think, is the end of May. So they don't have as many shots now to take that SAT if they were just counting on that early decision, if that makes sense.
No, I'm confused. So you're saying for the kids who put in their application for Harvard, but didn't test, they have to scramble and get a test?
No. This is for the next cycle. This is for next year. Yeah. Next year. No, this cycle is already done. But it's for kids. I mean, if you think about April and these kids are already planning, and they're working and they have a schedule and they're planning on when they're exactly doing everything. And now the school says, okay, you have to do testing. Now they have to scramble and go back if they weren't planning on testing to go back and start studying. It's just not ethical. I mean, listen, I think Caltech and Harvard are very, very high-ranking schools, and I'm assuming most of their kids knew already that they had to have testing that will position them. But there are some schools out there who still have not announced what their plans are for this coming cycle.
So wouldn't you counsel them, everybody take a test?
test.
We do. I counsel everybody to take a test because you don't want to should have, would have, could have, but it's more like the second or third test. Should that kid take it a third time? Should they take it a fourth time? Should they get additional tutoring, right? And also you have the issue of the digital SAT versus the pen to paper, right? So not every school has announced if you can super score your pen to paper score with your digital score, right? So
What does that mean, super score?
take different test scores from different tests that you've taken, and
You got the best English and the
combined.
best math, and you combine one.
Yeah.
Sure.
So a lot of schools have not even really come out and said if they're going to allow super scoring from the pen to paper test with the digital. So there's this whole unknown going on here. So a kid who took the SATs, who got like an 800 on English, but got a 650 on math, right? Now, if she wants to apply to Harvard, she has to go back and take the test. That 800 on the English might not ever be seen because if they don't super score. I don't know if that made sense.
No, that's great.
Why, if most Harvard applicants were submitting the test score anyway, why did Harvard announce this policy much less so late in the game? Like, what was the reasoning behind it, if anyone knows?
Well, there are some conspiracy theories out there that the College Board is smearing these schools to go back to
Okay.
right.
Well,
That's not founded by anything, right? Like I'm just putting that out there. Like,
Yeah.
we're wondering all of a sudden, the digital SATs come out, right? And they're trying to drum up business, right? They're as much as they say they're a nonprofit, right? And they have that .org or whatever they have next to their name. It's a business. And if people are not taking tests, they're going to lose their business, right? And I think that they want to drum up business. From what I understand, in some schools, it's not the admission officers at the schools, at the colleges that decide whether or not testing should be reinstated. It's actually a faculty decision. So maybe perhaps the faculty is seeing not as many competitive candidates or candidates now who are in their classrooms who are not as competitive as their students from like 4 or 5 years ago, right? So if the faculty is seeing that, then they're going to probably say, we need higher caliber students, like this is not, et cetera.
Davida, can you circle back to what Kristina asked you? Because you really didn't, I know you partially answered it, but she asked a great question. Because every year, now that I've done this 3 times, everyone says this was the hardest year. This was the hardest year to get kids in.
Bloodbath. It's a bloodbath.
It's a bloodbath. Every year I hear this from parents. Tell us, 24, was it really a bloodbath, or were kids getting in just like they were every other year?
I mean, the students that at the school that I'm working at and my clients, listen, our kids all have a place to call home, right? I'd say that very confidently. Where school's a little bit more selective, that were a little bit shocking. Some of them were like a Michigan, not so shocking. They've been on the same trajectory for many years. I tell my students, I was like, you can apply to Michigan, but don't count on it, right? Just don't count on it because there's something going on there with their numbers and how they spit things out, but don't count on it, right? And there were superstars waitlisted. And that's the other thing that Michigan does that's not so kind, is that they don't cut their kids loose, right? They don't cut these applicants loose. They waitlist them and they let them live in what we call purgatory, and then kids get in July, in August, right? And then they lose their deposit. They have to make this big choice. They have to lose their deposit at their other school, scramble for a roommate. Is it really worth it? And I tell all my students, cut bait. Like, you are done with Michigan if you don't get in. If you're not the kind of kid that can pivot in a heartbeat, then it's not going to be a great place for you. Why do that?
With respect to wait lists, what do you tell families in terms of, in reality, how likely is a student to get admitted off of a wait list?
I tell them, pretend it didn't happen. And I do. I say, put a deposit, and get excited for your other choice. Just get excited, embrace it. And if they get in, a lot of students decide not to take that admin off the wait list. They decide not to because they've already been hyped up. They've already found their roommate. They're already, invested, which I think is a great thing, because college is what you do when you get there. It's what you make of it when you get there. But circling back to Susan, your question about what do I advise my students to do, right? And I think that's a conversation. We're still seeing a lot of kids getting in early decision 1 and early decision 2, right? Financially, if you're in a position to do that and you have, that sort of relationship with a school and you're willing to do that, that's what we always say, don't apply to certain schools. That's not if you're not applying ED, right? So I have the stats up here for BU right now.
Christina's alma mater.
My alma mater.
Your alma mater, they had 79,000 applicants this year.
Is that all?
That's all. But they did increase their first year class size to 3,300, which is 155 more seats than last year, right? So despite the fact that they have this larger class size, they only now their admit rate is just 10.7%. BU. So BU, when I first started this, I'd say like 7-8 years ago, they were at 25-30%, right? And now they're almost in single digits.
Who's going to BU now? What's the profile?
I think that the profile is very similar to a student who might be applying to a Northeastern, a George Washington, because these are kids who want a city school.
Sure.
It's not incredibly rah-rah-ish. I mean, you have the hockey, but that's really basically that's what you have. And they're kids who are I think that they're more independent thinkers because they are living in like a city. NYU is also, I'd put that in that cohort also. So, that sort of thing. You asked
the up and comers, Davida. I know when my daughter went to Northeastern, I didn't even know what Northeastern was, and now it's the hot school.
Oh.
So we already know Northeastern's already up there with BU and George Washington. What do you see as the up and comer next wave hot school?
Good question.
That's such a great question. I think that there are a lot of hidden gems, and I think that it's really hard to answer that question because it's like I can say Fordham University, I think, is going to be a hot school.
Really?
Yeah. I think
that used to be a safe school for students who, wanted the Boston College, Georgetown experience, but couldn't get in. Well, who wanted the Jesuit component? And then you go to Fordham.
Yeah, and I think Fordham, I don't mark my words, but I think that they have 2 campuses. So you have the opportunity to have a traditional campus experience, which is in the Bronx, which is a gated campus. And you can also choose to live in Lincoln Center in New York City and live it's a city campus. And they have a fabulous business program. It's in New York City. So I'm going to say I think Fordham, in terms of that piece, is going to be, a school to watch out for. In terms of other schools that are hot it just runs the gamut. We hear the same names over and over and over again. I think that for out-of-staters, Ohio State is looking really great for a lot of people. You're going to see a lot more kids applying to like an Ohio State in Indiana, because those are a little bit less selective than Michigan or Wisconsin. Boulder also will be, I'll say, they're doing great. Those schools are doing great because they're taking the kids who are not getting into the Michigan and Wisconsin into their class.
Is Boulder getting more selective?
Not yet. Not yet. It'll take some time. And that's also a very, very big school. So I don't think it'll be it'll never hit the Michigan level, but it'll probably hit, like I would say, a Wisconsin or an Ohio State at some point, because
with 80,000 applications, or even if it's 50,000 applications.
Seriously, what's the difference?
There's no difference. What trends do you see? Does the essay matter?
Well, so Duke University just announced that they're actually moving that down in their priorities because of AI, right? So Duke has announced formally that they are no longer scoring their essays as highly as they were. I think what always will matter the most is the rigor of the child's curriculum, right? That is the
transcript.
Transcript.
You can't game a transcript.
Right. So I think the transcript is is going to be like, if you had a pizza pie, I'd say that's like 60% of the pizza pie. Really, I do, right? And it's not the transcript. I took woodworking and got an A plus, or I took pottery and I got it. It is
important classes, by the way.
they are, but it is like we're even seeing now like AP AB and AP BC Calc. Those were like 5, 6 years ago. Those were the really, really hard AP math classes. Now schools are looking for AP multivariable, right? They're like, for their engineering students, they are looking for AP multivariable. I don't even know what that is, right?
No, I wouldn't stand a chance, but I, of course, would never. I have no business anywhere near an engineering
Right?
program.
I want to challenge you on this, okay? Both Christina and I, we're both lawyers and we're both stronger in humanities. So are we going to get punished by a highly selective school if we didn't have high IP transcripts in the science and the math and the STEMs?
No, only if you're applying to a degree program as a college with a university of engineering or math, right? But if you're a humanities person, you're applying to a journalism program, they're not going to care so much. Like, they want to see rigor. They're not going to want to see the easiest math classes, but they'll understand that if you're taking, A push, AP Euro, AP Lang, AP Lit, and then you're just taking honors math, totally fine.
So how else can you stand out if it's not the essay anymore? Because I understand it's going to be with AI impossible to distinguish essays.
I'm wondering about this issue of the essays, though, because, of course, after the affirmative action ruling, there was a lot of discussion about how students can speak about various points in their personal lives that would be potentially relevant for consideration admission in the essay. But now it's interesting, the point you've raised regarding Duke and the role of AI, which that's actually really fascinating. And so I'm just thinking about how students could navigate through, these different, how the landscape has changed.
So I will say a few things about the AI essays. I've written 5 or 6 college essays on AI. There, you can tell it's written by a bot. And that was with me going back and changing things and asking AI to do certain things and change things up. It's crazy. Like, there's no way I would let any student submit an essay like that, because it doesn't sound like a human's written. I'm just being completely honest with you. Like, I've done it, and I did it also with my letters of recommendation that I have to now write for my students at my school. I've thrown things through a bot, and there's no comparison. Their human element is a big touch. I would say for the race issue, we saw a lot of schools after SCOTUS's announcement went and changed their supplemental questions to include a question about race or adversity in their supplemental questions. And for those kinds of questions, AI you can't write it. You can't write anything like that through AI, right? So I'd say AI is gonna be here. I don't think it's gonna, like, if you're a smart person, you can see exactly what's written by AI and what's not. But the smarter the computer gets, right, and the more information the computer is gonna have on essays, and then it's gonna get smarter as we go along, for sure. University of Michigan Honors Program just released their honors, because they invite kids for their honors program, and they said, put an essay through AI about answering this prompt, and then tell me, and then send that to us and tell us what's missing from the essay. So they're using AI. They know the kids are using it, but then they're asking, okay, what did AI miss? Like, tell us about that experience, right? So it's actually very clever. So I'm wondering, what other schools, if they'll follow a course with that. We won't know the supplements for quite a while now. So
other than transcript, so you rank transcript as first, because I've always thought that.
Right.
What would you say is next?
Every school has different priorities, but I would say what would be next is extracurricular activities. If there's testing, if this child has testing, I would say that would be next, right? If they're submitting testing, then I would say extracurricular activities. Then I would say letter of recommendations. And then I would say essays, but letter recommendations and essays probably are maybe equal. Every school is very different. And so that's what I would say. But the extracurricular activities, showing what the student's doing, and they're not just going home and watching Netflix and playing, video games, is going to be really important.
Are all extracurriculars created equal? I mean, what would you say in terms of if a student is, let's say you have that child who's just interested in everything and wants to be in this club and play that sport and have a job and volunteer and student council, so on and so forth. I mean, wonderful. But at the same time, what are your thoughts or what advice do you have for families that have to sort of focus or call through the extracurriculars?
Breadth or
Yeah.
depth?
Yeah, so I say be authentic to who you are. If you are doing all those extracurriculars because you are genuinely interested in all these different things, do it, right? Because then that will also be reflective on your transcript. It will be reflective from your letters of recommendation. If you're doing all these activities because you think you're just checking off boxes, oh, I'm doing a journalism one here, I'm doing a math one here, I'm doing an engineering one here, that'll check off all these boxes and that'll look well-rounded. I don't think that's going to be super authentic, and it'll resonate with the application. And there are two schools of thoughts. People are like, you want to create a profile and you want to make sure if you're an engineering student, then you are going to do everything engineering, in your extracurriculars. I don't necessarily buy into that so much. I think that authentically kids should be able to allow to explore what they're doing, and they're 14, 15 when this all begins. My big advice is pay to play activities never mean much, when I say pay to play, I spent summer at Harvard with a 2-week course on X, Y, and Z. That's what we call in the college world pay to play. And
I painted murals in a third world country.
Right. So those are manufactured experiences. And then there are the pay to play where you send your kids off and you were going to say, oh, they're going to, be on this campus and it's going to look great. I mean, scooping ice cream looks much better than being on a college campus,
This question, let me ask you though about being authentic. Conversely, to the child who's interested in everything, you have the child who's just all in on my life passion is crocheting. Should parents say, okay, that's wonderful that you crochet, but maybe think about some other activities? Or, I mean, when you have a child who's laser focused on a sport, a hobby, an instrument, whatever it may be.
Unless they're going to do something cool with crochet, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, right? So, okay, if their goal is maybe to be in fashion, right? Okay, so
Right, then it's amazing.
Right, then it's amazing. And then let's try to see like entrepreneurial stuff going on out there. Or maybe there's marketing, or maybe there's maybe you want to take some Coursera classes on fashion marketing, and then also babysit and also peer tutor in your class, or crochet, teach other people how to crochet, or crochet for babies that are in need, right? So like you can kind of take that sort of that passion, which is an overused word in the college world, right? And sort of infuse it into different areas of your life that are meaningful.
So how does that laser focused interest translate to your college education, but also maybe ways to, iterations of broadening that interest in other respects? So like the babysitting or so on and so forth. That was good insight there.
So tell me your question.
I think we were just commenting that was a really good insight, but I do want to go back to the pay to play, because just because something doesn't have great college resume value, I don't think it's a reason to not do it if you have another valid reason.
Of course.
Right. So my number 2, who and you were his college counselor privately, went to Berkeley one summer, and he today will say that was a formative experience for him, that summer experience, that he reflects back and feels so grateful that he went. So I don't think we should always pick things because of, will it look good for your college? No, it won't. Do something else.
Right. So he might not have even reported that experience at Berkeley. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
He
that.
did.
He did it, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
I think it was a pay to play. He did it.
He might not have reported
it. Did his job. Right.
I mean, it could have also been like, okay, that could also been a little bit of a touch point for an essay, right? Or, but you only have 10 activities to report, period, right? So you want to make sure that you're reporting the ones that mean the most to you and that, you feel are authentically you. And I always tell my students, if you did it and you really, really glean so much from it, then put it down for sure, right? But let's also do the description so that the reader understands why that experience was so important to you and what it would, what it did to sort of that formative experience, that sort of
Is
thing.
it hard internally now write those letters of recommendation?
Oh my God, I can't even tell you what I have to do. Like, right. So I'm going back, and I also feel pain for these other counselors who don't have this luxury of writing periods in their schedule, right? I have writing periods in my schedule because I'm working at a private school, right? And I remember when I worked at Laurel, they had days where they didn't even come to school, the counselors, because they were home on their writing days, and they were sitting there, and they have all the transcripts out there. So what I do with my students is I meet them 2 or 3 times, form a rapport with them, and then I also go back into their anecdotals, and I grab sentences or anecdotes from their teachers, and I craft a whole narrative that encompasses this kid, a page and a half long, and sort of represent the student. And it's painful that, other counselors don't have that time, that, those resources. Some teachers don't even write anecdotals, like they're just literally filling in, bubbles, comes to class, So
Do some schools, Davida, have better relationships with the colleges than others?
So I will say that's like we're seeing that fade a lot. Like, right, Brandeis University used to be a school that would do advocacy calls, and they said, no, we're not doing them this year. Brown used to do advocacy calls. They said,
Why
no,
is it fading?
because of the inequity.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It makes sense. It makes complete sense. Barnard also they told us this year. I mean, this is also my first year on staff, but so I can see the counselors, they're like, oh my gosh, we don't have that intel, right? And I'm like, well, I feel like that's good.
Well, I mean, this has been amazing, and it always is, and I'm so happy to see you. I know we spoke last week. Do you have any lasting thought regarding 2025 to say to parents, those juniors?
What wisdom would you like to leave?
I would like to leave that name brands are not, that there are more to the name brand. That really, I am a true believer is college is what you make of it when you get there, right? And you will bloom where you were planted, and that you should look beyond the name brand, right? You should definitely look. There are hidden gems out there that will take care of your child, that will take care of you, and really, really value the students that will be coming to their campuses.
I felt that way last weekend at Ringling College. It's very small, but I felt like when I walked on this campus, I didn't even know about the school, but I felt like I found a hidden gem for my daughter to really flourish as an artist.
And authentic for her.
And the other thing I would say is fall in love with more than one school. Right? You're not marrying the school for, fall in love with 3-4 different schools. One a far reach, one a Target, one a fall in love, and then you'll be.
My mother says it's always good to have options.
Well, Davida,
thank you. It was a pleasure.
I just love talking to you, and I miss you. So it's great seeing you.
All right, take care, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Real Talk with Susan and Kristina. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. And leave us a review so other people can find the content we share here. You can follow us on Instagram, just search our handle @StoneSupler. And for more resources, visit us online at studentdefense.kjk.com. Thank you so much for being a part of our Real Talk community. We'll see you next time.